Now here's our top focus. Freedom of the press is under assault in Hong Kong. After the demise of Apple Daily, another pro-democracy news outlet, Stand News has announced that it will remove opinion articles and columns it published before June and stop accepting donations. Stand News said in a statement that the measure taken were to protect the news outlet's supporters, writers and editorial staffers in the literary inquisition of Hong Kong.
I think that the situation and the message is clear from the government that making reports and covering news story will have some criminal result. You may be charged, you may be limited your freedom, whatever. So it's not easy to say that I'm not afraid with the situation.
This comes after an editorial writer of the now defunct Hong Kong pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily was arrested at the airport on Sunday night while attempting to leave the city. So far, 7 journalists and executives of Apple Daily have been arrested as Hong Kong cracks down on dissent in the city. Despite the crackdown, Stand News has pledged to keep reporting the news. The online platform, which is public funded, said it would stop taking money from subscribers and donors and stop accepting new subscribers. This is because under the national security law, assets can be frozen if authorities believe the money is linked to a crime. With the demise of Apple Daily, there only remains a handful of small online pro-democracy outlets in Hong Kong. Right, for more on this story, WION correspondent Richard Kimber is joining us live from Hong Kong. Richard, first up, would it be right if we say that freedom of press is under assault in Hong Kong at the moment?
Well, that's certainly the fear in the media industry here. Many of these small online operators such as Standard News and Citizen News, another operator whose founder I spoke to yesterday, say that they really feel the pressure after the efforts by police to put a stop to the Apple Daily's operation because of the police concerns over it violating the national security law. They say that there are major concerns about self-censorship, as you mentioned there, with journalists now becoming afraid to write what they think, and also concerns about how these platforms can continue to be funded if they have to switch off basically the means by which they're getting donations from wealthy individuals who want to see an independent press continue, or indeed just from public donations. Stand News is now the first to come out and basically turn off the taps for its own funding operation. It says that it has enough money to continue operating for the rest of the year, but it's also taken other steps which seem fairly drastic among media operations. It's actually cancelled the contracts of all of its employees so that the employees themselves are not seen to have a business relationship with the news organisation, and it's recommended that all of its board of directors resign so as to also distance them from the operation in an effort really to try and protect their employees and allow it to keep operating and reduce the chance of its own fears that some of those employees or directors may be arrested as part of this ongoing effort by police to clamp down on national security threats.
Right. Just to elaborate a bit on that, since you mentioned about the contracts between the employees, the writers and the editorial staff, just help us understand this. Stand News has said in a statement that the measures that were taken were to protect the news outlets, supporters, writers, editorial staff, as I just mentioned. What kind of a threat do they really face?
They're worried that rather like in the case of Apple Daily, there may be a widening spread of arrests taking place as part of a broader effort by police to prevent a series of articles that police say have undermined national security on the Apple Daily platform by calling for or encouraging the idea of sanctions against Hong Kong and Chinese officials because of the implementation of the national security law. That was the justification that the authorities have given for arresting and charging 2 of the most senior members of the Apple Daily staff, but since then we've seen more Apple Daily staff being arrested as part of this investigation. So the concern from the likes of Stand News, Citizen News, these smaller operators, is that they may be dragged into this as well, which is why in the case of Stand News they're now proactively and preemptively taking down articles on their platform which have made references to things like sanctions in the past, which are now such political hot potatoes, and to try and protect their own staff, trying to pretty much eliminate any obvious business relationship that exists between their staff and themselves. But they do still want to keep operating. So for the challenge going forward is how to keep running themselves as an efficient news operation without these types of fundamental business things in place, like contracts for staff.
As you mentioned, and I'd like to take that forward, Richard, you talk about what really the future holds for them. Now, with the demise of Apple Daily, what's the road ahead really for the remaining pro-democracy news outlets that you've got in Hong Kong? What do you reckon is the future?
Well, if you speak to the founders of these organisations, they say that they're still determined to keep reporting. As you mentioned earlier, Stand News says it wants to keep telling the news. But the question is, how freely can they do that, and how confident can they be that they can write exactly what they used to? The Hong Kong Journalists Association, that oversees all of these operators, is asking the government to clarify exactly what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, so it's easier for these types of operators to know where that red line is. The government has said that the red line should be obvious because it says that the national security law is perfectly clear, and it maintains that it is not trying to crack down in any way on press freedoms, and it's simply observing the national security regulations. But the main concern from all of the media industry here is, as I say, that red line is very blurred, and only really when this Apple Daily case comes to court will we start to see how the judges and the courts themselves deem these police efforts to try and crack down on media operations, and see whether or not the specific articles that police are alluding to are deemed by the courts to be breaking the law.
Right, that was Richard Kimber joining us live from Hong Kong. Appreciate you talking to WION. Thanks so much.